Hi, this is Lisa, the Survival Mom, coming back again to talk about bees. Another episode of my beekeeping diaries. We have gone through a really dramatic 6 weeks or so with our bees, and what you'll notice behind me is that you don't really see our beehives at the moment. They are all at a bee yard about 30 minutes away. We put them on some acreage up there, thinking that because we're going to have to do a lot of work with our hives, we just wanted to get them away. We wanted to get them away from our backyard. We wanted to get them all situated in a place where there's plenty of pollen and nectar for them, although they have done in the past, the last couple of years, they've done really well here too. So what you see behind me is actually not a beehive. It is what we have set out as a swarm trap. Where I live at any given moment on any given day, we have maybe 10,000 feral bee swarms in this whole area. So we have green belts, we have forests, we have, bees showing up in, people's, garages and inside their homes or whatever, when they get inside the walls. So it's a lot of feral swarms or wild swarms. So the sad point about all those wild swarms is that they have a very difficult time overwintering. And about 75 to 80% of these wild swarms will end up dying. Oh, a bee just flew by me. Maybe it's a scout bee. So we set up these traps. And so because we understand a lot about beekeeping, about 5% of everything there is to know, we have a lot to learn, but we manage the bees that we have. And so it's not like getting a pet. You don't just put out food once a while or check in on them, once a day. It is actively managing them, and that requires a lot of education and a lot of management work, at least for different periods of time. So right now we are in swarm season. It started about 3 or 4 weeks ago. It will progress through April and into May, maybe further into the summer, but we would like to catch another 1 or 2 swarms. We now have 6 hives. Started out with 2 about 6 weeks ago. We did some splits. We now have 6 hives, and we would like to actually grow our apiary even more. So we're enjoying this as a hobby. It is a money draining hobby. It takes a lot of time, but what I'd like to do today is give you 2 or 3 reasons actually to not get into beekeeping, and I love it. I mean, we're neck deep into beekeeping now, and we're far from the shallows now when it comes to beekeeping. But I've noticed in Tractor Supply, at Sam's Club, there are these, all-in-one beekeeping kit. Become a beekeeper today. Harvest your own honey. It's fun and easy. It is not easy, and we think it's fun, but I predict that a year or so from now, we're going to see an awful lot of these all-in-one kits showing up on Marketplace and Craigslist, because when you get into beekeeping and you buy this all-in-one kit, they don't tell you, that's probably, I'm sure, in the instructions somewhere, but you're going to have to spend another $250 or more to get your first swarm of bees. So right off the top of the bat, you're looking at a $250 to $300 all-in-one kit. It does not contain everything you need. Then you're going to have to actually buy your bees. So now at this point, you're about $500 to $600, in the hole for bees, and there's not even a single sign of honey yet. Most beekeepers will tell you that to not expect harvesting honey your first season. Now, we were able to. Our bees just went to town and they produced a ton of honey, but typically it takes time for them to build up the comb and to build up honey for their own stores. So what we typically do is we let the bees have all the honey in the main deep box, whatever there is. That's mostly a brood box, or it contains the brood chamber, but they will also develop honey in that box. Then we put on a smaller box on top of it. It comes in 2 different sizes. We use what is called a super, and whatever honey the bees have in their main box, the deep, and in the super, that's theirs. And anything extra that they might produce in yet a 3rd box, that is what we would harvest. Our very first season, we were able to harvest 7 cups of honey, and we were just thrilled beyond measure. We just could not believe that this was real. But you will probably not harvest honey, or maybe a small amount, your first season. So one reason not to become a beekeeper is there are a lot of hidden expenses, and I just touched on the bees, the bee swarm itself. If your bees die, as ours did about 5 years ago, we had to start over again. Each time, that's another $250 to $300, depending on where you buy them. Maybe you can get some freebies by setting up a swarm like we've done, a swarm trap, but there's a lot to know before you start purposely setting up these swarm traps, and I would not do it just because you catch the bees, and then the big question is, well, now what? So now what do? We have, this bin, or we have this cardboard box full of bees, but what do we do now? So that takes some expertise to know what to do and how to begin managing them. And very often a wild swarm can just swarm away again. And so there's no guarantee. Actually, there are no guarantees in most of this. So number one is just the expense with an awful lot of hidden expenses. Number two, beekeeping is animal husbandry. You are not buying a pet, a dog that you play with, you let it go outside, you take it for a walk once, a day or whatever, and you feed it. There is an awful lot to know about management, and that really is what beekeeping is all about. It is all about managing the bees. The bees know what to do. They're going to build their comb. The queen is going to lay her eggs. The little nurse bees, they're going to take care of the larva. They're going to be capping the comb, with a little egg inside so it develops. The bees know what they're going to do. But very often, because of pests such as a varroa mite or wax moths, small hive beetles, ants, there are an awful lot of different issues that will affect the health and productivity of your hives. And so you need to know what to do about those. In those cases, you also need to be able to know the seasons. Right now, in about a week, where we live, we are going to be getting into a very big, this is the highlight of our year, other than bee school, we're going to be getting into a very big flow, and that is the major pollen flow in my area. Now, yaupon trees right now are flowering, but we're waiting for those Chinese tallow trees here in kind of the southern part of Texas, southeastern part of Texas, to just explode. And when that happens, we may have to run out to the bee yard, maybe a week and a half, and put on yet another honey super, because they are being so productive. The front of your beehive during the major flow of the year, it's going to look like the busiest airport you could ever imagine, with bees coming and going. They're loaded up with pollen. They're dropping off the pollen. The bees in the front of the box, they're unloading the pollen, and then they're storing the pollen in the frames. It really is an incredibly productive time. But again, it's about management. So one thing we have done to manage is we have been feeding our bees with sugar water and a little bit of pollen. So when we inspect our hives, we look at the frames, we look to see, do we see much nectar in there? Do we see much pollen? Is the queen laying? If there's not pollen and nectar, and there's really nothing much going on in terms of flowers and, basically just kind of what happens in the spring and summer, the queen is not going to lay very many eggs. So we have learned over the years to read our frames, both sides of the frame, and then kind of determine, do we need to add and give them more sugar water? And we feed them a 1-to-1 sugar to water, and that helps them build comb. In the very early part of the spring, you want your bees building comb, just like crazy, because that is where they're going to store the pollen, and that is where honey is going to be developed. So we really wanted to feed, but you also need to know when to stop feeding. And a lot of education goes into this. So reason number one to consider not becoming a beekeeper and not jumping on the bandwagon is hidden expenses that can amount to many hundreds and thousands of dollars. Number two is that it is animal husbandry. If you were to buy chickens, or some of you have chickens or goats, cattle, whatever, there is a whole lot more to it than just buying the animal or getting the animal for free somewhere. There's a whole lot more. That's the easy part. So buying that all-in-one kit from Sam's Club, and then forking over $200 to $300 for your first swarm of bees, that's the easy part. But it truly is animal husbandry and management. Rule number three, or reason number three to not get into it, I have like 15 of these written down, and I'll continue my list of reasons in an upcoming video follow-up. But another reason is that, really getting over that fear of bees. So the last video I made was I think toward the end of February 2023, and our bee population in our hives was exploding, just exploding. We had a really early spring, and so that kind of triggered that hive and that queen to know we start laying eggs. We're in the business of laying eggs, to produce more bees. That's what we're going to do. So we would take off the top of a box, and as my dad described it just a few days ago, it looked like it was just an explosion of bees. And so you need to know the seasons, you need to have the bee education, but then you also have to overcome and the fear of bees while retaining the respect for bees. So I was stung 3 times under my chin, and it's a little bit, it still is there. I don't know if they stung me right in some kind of I don't even know, a muscle or cartilage or something, I don't even know, under my chin, but it made it look like I had a double chin for about 3 weeks. And you will probably get stung. So you don't want to get stung, of course, and it hurts and it's not much fun. But I have found that when people are just very, very afraid and timid around the bees, that they really can't manage them properly. And that describes us with our very first hive 3 or 4 years ago. I remember 5 years ago, we started going out, and I remember running out really fast in my bee jacket to put a jar of sugar water in, and then running back in the house as fast as I could. So we have, over time, we really have become used to the bees buzzing all around us. We're used to the sound of the bees. I've had bees get in my hair. That is no fun. But it is replacing the fear with respect. And the more you learn about the bees, the more you got to respect them. So those are just 3 reasons to seriously consider if this is a good time for you to become a beekeeper. The money issue may or may not be a problem. It is enjoyable. It's an incredibly enjoyable hobby, but there's a big learning curve involved, so you want to make sure you join beekeeping Facebook groups, especially those that are local to you, and especially if they're active. Some local groups won't be very active or helpful, but some are. Also, find a local beekeeping group in your area, because doing this all completely on your own, it may be a resounding success, or you may be like us after your very first winter with your beloved and expensive bees. You go out, maybe in February or the first week of March or so, and they're all dead. Well, what happened? That's part of management. It's knowing what to do at different seasons of the year. So I wanted just to share, a little bit about my experiences, our diaries. There are a lot of resources on how to be a beekeeper and how to set up your frames, and that's not really what I want to share. I just want to show you, what's going on with us. So I'm going to end this video now, and I'll be back with another couple of reasons to know what you're getting into, before you become a beekeeper and you make that investment both in time, money, and even in emotion. So I will see you next time around.